Welcome everyone to another Unstuck. Glad you could be with us. Hope you're taking care of yourselves physically and mentally in a odd time. I'm not sure what the words are. Just hope you're taking care of yourselves. So we got a lot of great sessions this year. Every single week this year, we're kind of up in the ante on and some really fabulous conversations. But tonight, really excited. We have Kevin Gillepsie with us. He is executive recruiter at Google, and I'm going to talk about some stuff.
That's going to be fun.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm well, man. I'm well. I really appreciate you taking the time to be down here.
Oh, it's worth it. Absolutely. Yeah. Happy to be here with everybody online, too.
So here's where I'd love to start. People Google, people think it's California. People who know, okay, it's New York.
Yeah.
You're living in New Haven now.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I'm like, people who watch know I'm a New Haven homer. Like,
yeah.
I love this town, right? So I'm kind of biased. So what I'd love to start is tell me about the experiences you have in New Haven. Like, what do you love, and then what do you miss about New York? Because I love New York too, but
yeah. I mean, first of all, I love New Haven. I think I walk past a sign in my neighborhood. I live in East Rock, and almost every day we're walking our dog. There's a sign that says Heart New Haven, and I think that's a sentiment felt from the beginning of our time here. So I'm here with my fiance. She is a PhD student at Yale, and we moved in the middle of the pandemic. And kind of the question itself, the New Yorkness, New Havenness of the spectrum for us, kind of out of one throw of COVID. I think with the pandemic, we were based in Brooklyn earlier on in the year. To have been in New York at that time, where the rates both from a death and just a sheer COVID positivity standpoint were astronomical right around us. And we lived in Bushwick, Bed-Stuy in particular. I mean, it was one of the few epicenters in New York that were literally cratering this thing called COVID. We got to June, and Iman, my fiance, she knew that she'd be starting in the fall. Right. We got to June, and it was kind of a point of deciding, do we want to continue to be in a bunker of a New York City apartment with 8 or so other units around us and all these other people trying to figure out COVID, kids, elderly, ourselves, other people like us as well, and existing in that, which we had come to find in the few months at the peak of COVID to be sustainable, to kind of get a breath of fresh air. And so we got to the top of, or I guess the top of June, and said, hey, let's use this as a pivot month to move. And so, as I'm sure many of you may know, if you've moved during the pandemic, that it takes more time than, and the parts have to be kind of meticulously placed together. But getting to New Haven in the middle of the summer, arriving at Yale and then the environment that is Yale and New Haven, and having space is something that we're still experiencing now in January. We're very thankful for it. That's one of the things I love the most about New Haven, going from multiple people living in a very cramped space in New York to just a few of us in a house. And I mean, sheesh, for our dog, he has grass. We're dodging glass on the street in New York City. But at the same time, what I miss about New York is the energy of it. And I know that exists in a non-COVID situation, particularly in New Haven as well. That's one of the things that attracted us to choose Yale for Iman's PhD as well. But at the same time, I think that that's something we sit in our apartment and it's quiet New Haven on a Friday and think, oh, well, we love to just be able to go out to the strip of bars that we were used to in New York, or take the train into the city, catch up with our friends at a brunch on a Saturday. But I don't think these things are particularly unique to New York. I think that there are things that we're all missing right now about life in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's occurred to me as you talk, this kind of, the way you describe New York, both the kind of challenges in the midst of the COVID and then all the things you miss, it's, how's this for a segue? It's kind of like the Google thing where it's the mindset is so New York is an it place, right? I live in New York. That's a thing, that's, we put it on my daughter, since she was, I think, 12. I want to live in New York, I want to live in New York. And then there are realities to it. Right? There are realities that are very different. It doesn't negate the good stuff, but they're just realities that don't exist anywhere else, right? And particularly at certain events or certain times like a pandemic, there's a very different reality there, right?
Yeah.
So continue that analogy.
Yeah.
Like part of a big thing I wanted to explore with you is, we talked about this when we first met, right? Like Google for us, tech school.
Yeah.
Google is like New York.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like oh man,
yeah.
I'm gonna go to Google and make it. Right?
Oh yeah.
Like even more than some of the other, like there's like
Yeah.
1As, like Uber. Oh my God, Uber would be great.
Yeah.
Tesla would be great. But Google's,
Yeah.
it's like the one of the
You're making
probably
me
three.
blush thinking about the two together.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so that well, there's a bunch of stuff I want to explore. Let's
Yeah.
just start with that surface level, right? So this kind of mystique about Google.
Yeah.
So tell me about, like, you said what you love about being in New York.
Mm-hmm.
What do you love about being in Google? Like what being at an it place like that?
Yeah.
What do you love?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest perks about New York is its scale. And I think one of the things that we're obsessed with understanding and providing at Google is scale. I remember when I first got my first recruiter email from Google, and at the time I had been working for a couple of years in New York at an executive recruiting firm, and so had lived this very like Midtown East, suit and tie every day, catching the train, hustle and bustle with all these people around you, and getting this email from Google seemingly to come in at the time do the same role that I had been doing for a couple of years at an executive search firm. It felt more familiar than what I expected. And I think that's kind of one of the mystified, if that's a word, things about Google is that it exists for a lot of us as a search engine. And it is. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, Google, the thing that we're obsessed about when it comes to scale is making sure that we have scalable information and that we're organizing that and that we're providing that to people. We have probably over 1,000 products that help us do that and services that help us do that. And that's one of the most fascinating things about Google. And so you're right. In a sense, at Google, it is a New York City of tech. It is this mecca melting pot of interest and desire to kind of like solve at something that I think is very particular about New York as well. And so I found a lot of comfort, again, in like talking about the familiar as this way to get traction as I was interviewing at Google and things of that sort. Funny enough, I said I was blushing when you talk about Google and New York together, because that New York in itself and Google being in New York is what probably made the biggest impression on me and attracting me to Google when I was interviewing.
Right.
I guess in a pre-COVID world that we don't exist in, I was able to go on site and interview at Google's office. Walking into their New York campus, it's a city within a city.
It's like Disney World for techies.
It's crazy.
It's
Exactly. And it is Disney World for an adult that's working, again, going from suit and tie to T-shirts and jeans and tennis shoes. All of a sudden I'm becoming like this sneakerhead, though I'm not wearing sneakers today just because of the casualness of Google. I think the access that they provide and the worry that Google as a company wants to kind of take off of its employees. A lot of people just walk into Google's office in New York and they see all the cafes and they think just free food, but what they're really doing is working at this sort of existence of elevating off of their employees concerns that most people experience in a given workday. How much time do you spend worrying about where you're going to eat for lunch? Google wants to take that away, and not to get you to work more, but to get you to have more mind space to do really whatever it is that you want. I can go on and on, but I mean, I think those are some of the things that immediately come to mind that really kind of excited me and again gave me traction to feel like I belong.
So I wanted to get into that because one of the things. So I've spent almost no professional time at Google. Like I've had friends there, and so I've kind of gone in, seen the place, and Disneyland, even the old building before the new one in New York, and that was still even that was spent a lot of time at Facebook. Spent about 10 years. The first 10 years they were around. Tiny bit of time at Apple, but Google, nothing meaningful, right?
Yeah.
One of the senses I have, you kind of alluded to here, is the ability, the encouragement, and the infrastructure to help people focus on what matters, right? So you say about providing lunch, I mean, that's like a micro thing, but like, tell me about, just I'm a tourist in Google land for the next 5 minutes, right? Tell me about, what does that system do to help you? Because you're working on big things, you're working on scaling big things.
Yes.
And I got to imagine there's a tendency for professional ADD, right? To kind of go this problem, that problem, this problem, scale it this way, scale it that way. Right? So how do you guys help people stay focused while not getting corporate and closed down?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually by kind of taking off the shackles, so to speak, of what a corporate environment looks like. I could take you through a day at work at a Google office as quickly as possible. What it really is having this complete sense of autonomy and this complete reality of autonomy in your day. Some of the things that are notable about Google's sort of work culture, sure we have, it's a company of almost 200,000 people, if not more now. So yes, we have structure.
Is that how big you guys are now?
Yeah,
really?
it's massive, right? And it's in probably upwards of 50 locations around the globe, you know, and 30 of which are throughout the North American continent. And so, you know, when you think about that, you know, Google can't have their eyes on every single person doing every single thing. And so there's this natural sort of approach, even in a really robust hierarchy or structure in a corporation, that allows everyone to kind of feel the flatness of it. Not just in like our org chart, just a very kind of structured way to talk about it, but the flatness in terms of the visibility. And maybe I'm just saying this as an executive recruiter, but my stakeholders at Google are, you know, SVPs and VPs and directors and these, you know, people who are running on average probably $1 billion worth of Google's business. And so to have that sort of access just as a individual contributing recruiter might be unique to my job, but I think that's what a lot of Google employees feel, that you know, we're able to kind of show up as individuals contributing to this greater sort of purpose. And so you have a sense of responsibility to yourself and sense of responsibility to the company, enough that you don't really have to be watched and monitored or managed, micromanaged, and that allows us to actually, again, the taking off those shackles that are tradition in a work environment as we've structured it in the world, have actually probably given us more space to like focus in like, on what matters most.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you do, so, you know, traditional organization, you know, a lot of hierarchy, and you just said, you know, 200,000 people, you can't keep on top of everybody, but the whole traditional design organization, right? You go to the insurance industry.
Exactly.
No offense to the insurance industry.
Or
Our
any
friends,
other industry.
colleagues, sponsors, we have sponsors in the insurance industry. No offense, we love you.
Yeah.
But you go to these traditional systems, and the whole point of the design is to keep track of everybody in some cascade of monitoring. You know, 10% of everybody's job is to be a security camera on the 5 people below them, right?
Yes, yes.
So in an environment that embraces, and again, this isn't, you know, kind of consistent in tech, but for you guys, in an environment that embraces, okay, we can't stay on top of everybody. We want to take the shackles off, as you said. So the fear that in traditional organizations, if we do that, we lose control. People aren't productive. You know, they go rogue. They go, you know, whatever. Atonal music, rioting in the streets. You know, kind of a quote from a movie for how do you guys deal with that, right? So how do you keep people from going rogue? What's the balance of take the shackles off, but you know, people aren't just doing things that don't matter?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't make Google out to be, I think that they're a model for this sort of model of having a work culture, a company culture, but I would say that we're still striving for it as well. And in fact, some of the very things that are reality for Google keep us from achieving that to be this like beacon of light in this kind of like work culture type of way. For instance, like I said, 200,000 employees, you can't keep eyes on them, but just as quickly I could say with Google's scale, 200,000 employees, there are structures there, and I think that they constantly grapple with this culture of pre 200,000 people Google that was super free. Anyone could do whatever they want. Now you do kind of have to monitor your systems and your people, and you know, Google's a union. We just had a group of 200 or so employees unionized. That's great, but that's very against the grain of what Google wants its employees to feel that they need to do. And at the same time, some of the rationale for doing that very thing is Google's monitoring of its employees. Some people feeling like that in this very robust company that they don't actually have the freedom to do whatever it is that they want. I think the way that Google, every time that challenge happens, the way that they're able to meet it, and probably why they don't fail at this as much as other companies that attempt this sort of freedom-based corporate culture, is that they care about having you show up in this very holistic way to work. So when I think about my job at Google, I don't really think about my job as a recruiter. I think about my involvement in my employee resource group, like Google Network,
Right.
but like not as like a job, as a part of being in this company,
Right.
in this thing, Google. I think about my team and like all of the ways in which we help and kind of mentor and develop each other in ways that have very much to do with our core job, but a lot to just do with ourselves as holistic people. And I've seen that throughout the pandemic. I think Google's done a really good job at adjusting a workforce to go virtual. Some of the first things that they do when you're an employee at Google and you accept on the line, they toss everyone a laptop and they toss you a cell phone and a corporate card for corporate purchases that you might need. One of the things that they did to kind of like take and alleviate the burden of COVID and working from home is they gave all of their employees $1,000 allowance basically to buy whatever office equipment that they needed to. Out of that, I've been able to birth and scale up an entire work from home office that I didn't have prior to. And so I think that Google, when it meets these challenges where it sees the reality of being a large corporation, it also meets those challenges with a sense of humility that, you know, if we continue to provide the programs and the structure that allow people to feel like they're showing up to Google every day beyond more than just their core job, then we'll continue to be successful. And that the model, the freedom model that we have in place that causes focus doesn't really have to go anywhere, even as it shifts and changes.
So I'm going to play a little bit, not even devil's advocate. I'm going to take on the voice of some of the people I know that are watching, right, and say, well, sure, Google can afford to give everybody $1,000 on laptops and all that.
Yes.
So tell me about, But I'm willing to bet that there are intangible things, right?
Yes.
So those are all tangible, require cash.
Sure.
What are the intangible things Google does to create that same kind of freedom, you know, whether it's managerial style or culture? Or, what are the things that don't cost money that you've experienced your company does that allows this kind of freedom?
Yeah, I think going back to the individual contributor model and the managerial model, it's interesting that you just bring that up because I do often see, and I think most Google employees see their managers and their directors and such as more of just peers and partners at helping them kind of achieve this common goal versus a boss. And so I think that's a huge part of one of those intangible things. I think the other intangible thing that it provides Google, and this again might sound a little highbrow saying it, but it's an incredible brand to get behind. The ability to kind of be at a company that again has 1,000 or so or plus products and services that very commonly, and I think very subtly interact with people so much on a daily basis is sort of like a badge of honor that I think give a lot of people sort of a career platform to really say that they can go and do anything. And so I think that was one of the mindset shifts that I had going from my previous company, which was great it was a great executive recruiting firm and was great in its industry, to being at Google, which is this very multifaceted company that has nothing, my core job is not the core purpose of the company, you know, is this sense that we're also just collectively contributing to this greater need of society at the end of the day, in our core jobs and beyond our core jobs at Google, and that therefore anything that we want to do is actually quite possible. But what does that birth for Google? Again, there is a actual yield that they get and a benefit that they get as a company from that. Those are the ideas, or that's the type of culture and the mentality that's birthed Gmail, that's birthed Maps, that's birthed YouTube, like all of these garage type of ideas that people still say like they want to incubate in tech. You know, and that's why they've been so successful at it. I'd be jealous of Google if I weren't there.
They got. It's interesting, you know, the kind of badge, right? Because this is another thing that people kind of use as a, well, yeah, sure, Google has got the badge, but we had a company for a little while they were in here. They didn't start here, but for a little while they were in here. But it's a New Haven company. It's called CClick Fix. All right. It's a business model is really simple. A tech company and brilliant, as most ideas are. They're simple and they're brilliant. The idea was, you know, you're driving down the street and there's a pothole in the road. If you had an app where you could just identify, you see it, you click the app, and you know, the geotag, there's a pothole here, instantly goes to the appropriate city, right?
Yeah.
So the whole city is wired for CClick Fix. You see a stoplight out in New Haven, you see whatever, download the CClick Fix app.
I like
the
that.
city is on top of it within 12 hours or whatever it is. You get it.
Yeah.
So beautifully simple, right? Everybody I met at that company, right? They weren't 200,000. Everybody I met at that company, and they sold the company last year, and so now, you know, they're off to other things. The company still exists, but, you know, Ben sold it. But everybody I met at that company saw the thing as a badge.
Yeah.
Right? They had that same relationship to it,
Yeah.
right? Even though they weren't 200,000 and this kind of empire.
Yeah.
So sometimes people dismiss, again, this mythology in New York, mythology of Google. Well, sure, people are proud to work there because it's Google and they got this. But it's about, creating an environment like you're talking about.
Yes.
Ben created the same kind of environment. I'd imagine that you guys created at Google. Yeah. People have a lot of autonomy, but high accountability. There's a lot of pride in what they do. There's a clarity of what we do. I'm traditionally an org psychologist. That's like my actual background.
Nice.
There's this a concept called task significance. The degree to which I can see what my piece of work does to contribute to the larger whole and the difference it makes.
Okay.
Really important for people to connect with their job, right? So in that company, and in Google, it sounds like, whatever I do, if I'm an executive recruiter, I see how it connects to making lives better.
Yeah.
It's not an abstract thing in a box, right?
Yeah.
It's great. So let's pivot the conversation, if you don't mind, and talk about, you are ultimately a tech company.
Yes.
Right? And one of the big things, not one of the big thing we're here to do, District Arts and Education, is to create access points for traditionally underrepresented communities. Black and brown, female, LGBTQ plus. We're starting an initiative later this year for physically disabled because tech careers, So I'm curious, kind of what you guys. My experience at tech companies is like they're desperate for talent from everywhere. They don't care.
Yeah.
Right. They just want and need the talent.
That's a great way to put it.
Right? I don't care where you go. We don't have it's the opposite of what the barriers are in some other industries. And yet, there's a graph I use in almost every presentation I do, and you look at representation in computer science. It's 1992 to 2017 is when the graph was done. Yeah. And you look at white male, and it's like this, and you look at every other demographic, pretty much flat, despite all the efforts. Yeah. Every demographic, female, people of color, LGBTQ, all of it, it's just flat, little blips up and down like this. And everybody's working hard at it. There are people that are committed to it, companies are committed to it. I'm curious what you guys, how do you engage with this issue beyond the kind of obvious things, right? Because again, I got to think that you're hungry for talent wherever it comes, and diversity for a smart company is not about, is actually not about do good. Do good is a side benefit. Yeah. It's about we get diversity of thought, and that's where innovation comes from.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
So I'm prattling on. You get the question. So what do you guys do about this stuff that's maybe unique?
Yeah, I think that the question that you asked is actually one of the few things that keep most people who care about the future of Google and companies like it up at night. And probably for any business manager, any leader should hopefully be keeping them up at night. I know even for me, when I think about, and I'll go back to the scale point, we have all these products and services, but we also reach probably 3 billion plus people around the globe with those products and services. That is a plural and diverse mass of people. And so where it hurts really is then to look back at ourselves, to kind of put the mirror to Google and look at the plight of black people at a company like Google, where there's like less than 1% of us. I mean, whatever the percentage is, it's embarrassingly low.
Same in every tech company.
And it's the same in every tech company. And so one could assume that Google, because of its scale and because of its ability to kind of put money and investment behind diversity initiatives and build these pipelines and things like that, that we're doing a great job at it. I think that most tech companies, again, when they look at themselves late at night and in the mirror and say, why am I not perfect, would say that this is one of the gaping sort of issues that they have. Right. I do think that what Google has done a great job of, especially in the last few years, is finding ways in which, through skill set development, they can connect to communities that they have their products in. So there's several different digital incubators. There's these like startup and kind of venture capital arms that want to invest in communities that are historically marginalized and help people who want to found companies to get the investment dollars to scale up and things like that. I think where Google, and this is where diversity really comes in to help tech companies like Google, is actually helping them to kind of figure out, like they have the service to connect to these marginalized communities, but they're not really connected.
Right.
I look at New Haven as a great example of that. Coming here, I've had the fortune of meeting folks like yourself that are doing the work here to incubate, the next generation of New Haven in terms of companies and the commercial space, but also in terms of people who come from historically marginalized backgrounds and underrepresented backgrounds to be those people who are creating the next Google. And they can do that right here from New Haven. I think that Google believes in that too. I think that, again, there's just this like plug that's not really hitting the socket. and so we've all got to come to the table and kind of admit fault at that. I think companies that are in tech, their fault, or companies in general, because I think every industry struggles with this, is that a lot of our diversity initiatives are just lip service. Yeah. And so what I tend to see is that, even as I see this really as a recruiter, we have diversity recruiters, we have outreach and talent engagement pipelines that are connecting with HBCUs and things like that, but where's that pipeline really fitting into the community where the people really are? And not to say that they're not there too, but if we're really looking to make pivotal change, we've probably got to go beyond these traditional structures in which that we see those pipelines existing in the first place. And I think for most companies, it's at universities, and beyond that, I hope that they want to see a whole Burton and say this is the place where I can also get that benefit.
Yeah. I'm just connecting something that connecting what you're saying to some other conversations I've had recently. There's this phenomena with the corporate folks we talk to where there's a legitimate sense of, use a farming analogy, right? There's a legitimate sense of, absolutely, we want to buy locally grown, organic, sustainable tomatoes. Oh, yeah. We support that, absolutely. Yeah. And they live up to it, right? When we produce those, absolutely. Yeah. But now I go to them and I say, listen, here's the deal. We got a problem with the soil, and we got a problem with the irrigation, and we got a problem, right? And they're like, yeah, that sounds, I get it. Let us know when you get those tomatoes. We want to support. We will prepay you for tomatoes. They don't understand the systemic pipeline and how they need to take accountability for a 10-year view.
I got to take that analogy.
Yeah,
I'm going to take that back to the halls of diversity and recruiting and talent acquisition and say that is the issue.
That's it. So we, I over the summer did this kind of did an analysis on our first year here. And found just a disturbing number. The people that apply from inner city New Haven and the inner cities in Connecticut to our school here failed the entrance exam 2 to 3x everyone else. And so I dig and start looking at that. Yeah. And what we find is that we're not teaching computer science in inner city high schools. We're not teaching critical thinking. We're not teaching design thinking. We're not taking systems thinking. We're not, all the precursors, right? And so what happens is, large companies and then places like Stanford and MIT, they're desperate to find the geniuses in these neighborhoods, but they only have a filter to be able to see the to stick with the farming analogy, the sprouted seeds, right? The slightly germinated seeds. Those kids who could show their genius in the context of the existing system. Right? Yeah. What we have to figure out how to do, and we're piloting a new program this year, just a free program for high school kids here in New Haven. What we have to figure out how to do is to take the ungerminated seeds and provide soil for them, where they could start to sprout, and then they could be, seeable by places like Google and Uber and et cetera. But we've not been around for long, but we've found literal geniuses that were ungerminated seeds, and with some of that early kind of work, all of a sudden now, okay, got it. Tesla wants to hire them or whoever.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what's it going to take to have corporate America understand, to have Google understand that they have to not just do the really good work of buying the organic tomatoes,
right?
But they have to take a 10-year view and start helping with the. I'm putting you on a huge spot. Please defend Google's. That's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking for your insight. How do we help folks like you inside make the case for taking a 10-year view and really owning the ecosystem?
Yeah, First off, I'm still like stuck on the tomato analogy because I think it's so appropriate for like the challenge and like where we need to meet, right? Like I was just thinking of myself as a black man working at Google, like, you know, I love working at Google. Yeah. I think it's a great experience for a black man. Like, and I think that because, again, like that's where the tomato is. And so, and they've done a great job at cultivating that. We have all of these programs, all of this support for, you know, people. And when we don't, and when we see that challenge, we tend to be able to quickly throw money behind it to fill that gap. Tomato keeps growing.
Right.
I think that, and I was actually reading this in an article, we're kind of incubating in our household right now, just saying, hey, it's 2020, what the heck, like, why not, you know, if you have an idea, everyone else is doing it, why not see where it goes? And so I was reading an article just about the productivity of taking an idea that you have and really creating it into a business. And one of the tips that really resonated with me was that, I can't remember the author, I think it was on dae.com, but was saying that, like, you know, you have to really take pride in the small projects. You have to really take pride in the micro thing that you're just doing. Right. And if you only do that thing, like, that also could be just enough. Yeah. It could be more than enough, in fact. And I think about the problem, like you're saying, like, you looked at the data, you saw this issue, you looked at the data and you saw this need. And I think we're, again, all of us on any side of the spectrum can really sort of meet the challenge of seeing that doing that work, that small work, if we're only here teaching computer science classes, if we're only here teaching Mavis Beacon to kids in school, like, then we might be doing just enough to help funnel all of the other pieces. And hope that we're, as part of that ecosystem, at the bottom, if we want to put ourselves there even, that we're doing enough to make sure that the steps on top of ourselves are there too in the meantime. So if I'm not providing everything, who are the other people that are doing it? What are the other systems that are doing it? So if I'm teaching you Mavis Beacon to get coding in high school, then maybe there's an owl at Holburton that can actually help you get the skill set to get the job. You know, and like, let's make sure we're all part of that, you know, effort.
So that's another theme that's consistent here. You know, we have some very generous funders locally, at the state level, the DECD, CT Next, NHIC, shout out to all of those very generous foundations. And one of the conversations we've been having with the local folks is so many of the resources that are needed are already available and somebody's working on. What's missing is the coordination. Yeah. And so part of what we're like doing is saying, okay, you know what, we see that needs to get built. Let's not build it. Let's figure out who's doing it. Yeah. And then how do we, you know, we got a nice facility, we got resources, we got, how do we just connect? And so, you know, how do we build the pipeline with the Lego pieces that are already there? Exactly. You know? Yeah. And the thing, again, just candor, I'm still working through is how do we talk to folks like your organization, to the companies up in Hartford, in a way that respects the reality of the fact that the corporate clock is 3 months reset, 3 months reset, 3 months reset, and at best 12 months reset. Yeah, and the things we're talking about are, we need you to make a 10-year commitment. Yeah, you know? Exactly. And we're just working through how do we have that conversation in a way that respects their reality, but gets what needs to get done. Because, you know, listen, we put, you know, our little piece of the work, right? We put black, brown, female, LGBTQ, coders into tech. To me, that's not success. That's progress. Yeah, exactly. Right? Success is we put people in and they move to leadership positions and they're on boards of directors. It requires a 10-year view, right? And so, I'm asking you an impossible question. You know, tell me how to talk to your company. Yeah, no,
I think that the question itself again says that there's a glaring need that Google's not providing. It's funny, we're a company that can like focus on researching like deep neural networks and natural language processing for assistant and things like that. But these very human, those are very human issues too. But like this very human thing, I think that like we're all missing as an industry, not even just as a Google. You said that like just now, like what about the 10-year window? And you look at almost any philanthropic office at a corporation, and when they're putting money behind community initiatives, they're only really looking to go for a few years. So if their money doesn't yield an ROI for them, in terms of that philanthropic effort in a few years, they're not really able to look at the greater 10-year challenge that's still there. And I hope we get that together. I guess that's like the best answer I can offer. It's like, wow, that really is a need. The other piece is, I think that most companies do way too much of a good job at hiding the pages, the websites, the services that they actually have put a corporate structure around, philanthropic arms, community-based arms, social responsibility arms in their companies. I have people ask me not all the time, but I do have folks ask me like, hey, I'm looking to get like computers for my classroom and things like that. And I realize that they'll ask me and I'll try to go look for them as an employee at Google. And even for me, it's a click of 4 or 5 different pages before I even arrive at the page that hosts our social responsibility initiatives that would help supply that type of thing. And it's like, that's an actual issue. Like, because if they're asking me and I'm having that much of an issue, then that's probably 10 pages, you know, for that person. I think we got to make our as companies, our social good more visible. We're willing to do it for brand marketing. I wish we were willing to do it just for these types of initiatives to really connect that link.
It's a great point. I mean, we found that, and listen, we're sophisticated, right? And plowing through some of this stuff is a big challenge, right? A small agency with 3 employees that's really doing meaningful work. 3 employees and 20 volunteers trying to navigate some of these things. It's very hard. You're right. You're
tough.
right.
We hide it so much, and there's so many different programs I was thinking about today, and the community, the audience that we're in, and thinking about what sort of resources that I really want to bring to the table. And I realized that a lot of the resources that I could bring to the table are first branded by Google. And so I think that that's what happens with a lot of companies, is that they want to own the benefit of the social good. They don't want to necessarily, like if you were saying, oh, I've already got that. I have the school. I can provide that already, actually. I just need to have your partnership in it. They'll say, no, well, we want to own the school, kind of thing. And I use that as just one example of, again, where I think companies are not necessarily listening. They're wanting maybe even just too much to do or hide or manifest for themselves versus help get the soil.
It's we're going to figure it out. You said hope earlier, some in my kind of core profession, did a lot of just executive development, leadership development. I teach in organizational psychology programs. I run a master's program in leadership and change. Been running that for 20 years. One of the dozen or so core principles is there is no hope. On things that you're committed to, hope is the enemy.
Nice.
Right? I can hope that it's not going to rain tomorrow. I can hope that the Yankees win the pennant. I don't care about baseball, right?
No.
Because I can't exercise commitment there. On this issue, I have no hope. I've got commitment, right? And because it's go to work, and it's not going to get solved in my lifetime, but it's sure as heck going to get pushed forward.
Exactly.
And then somebody else is going to push it over the line. So let's get down to kind of on the ground concerns for folks who are trying to get into Google. So let's say we got some of these seedlings that sprouted and kind of found their genius and cultivated it. How do you approach a behemoth like Google? Because you guys, you're 200,000 employees, you probably get 2 million applications, right?
Exactly.
So how do we even approach you?
Well, I guess as a disclaimer, I didn't mention what type of executive recruiting that I do, but I focus on recruiting engineering and technical leaders, I guess engineering adjacent leaders, so product managers and other type of technical functionality for primarily Google Cloud and for Google's technical infrastructure. So that's basically all of the infrastructure that pumps out of our data centers that support all of the products that billions of users use. And so I obsess about these things. I was waiting on this question because it's something that in the back of my work that I've been focused on. I recruit at a level where we're looking for talent that have a certain gravitas at technical skill set at 10 to 15 years. What a priority would be for an engineer that's still coding. And so when I'm working with my engineering leaders to prep them for interviews, one of the things that I tell them to do is to think about distributed systems, because that's going to be the type of questions that they're asked. And one of the questions that we tend to ask at Google of like director level engineering candidates is, show me, can you design a distributed system for XYZ? Design you know, how the infrastructure would be set up for YouTube or for Twitter or for Facebook, whatever it is. And so we're looking at the systemic level of what the coding structure really is kind of leading up to. I do think it's important, and it's good to be, as a coder, engineer today, to be able to connect the code that you're putting to its use cases in other environments in terms of conveying your knowledge of code. I think that some of the bare basic things that I would ask older engineers and younger engineers to really focus on in preparing for interviews at a place like Google: algorithms, data structures, making sure you have your coding portfolio, I think, pretty robust, having the work to show. You know, and this is even in terms of diversity. I think that companies, we want to be hiring for all of these other core competencies, but sit on any call with me and my fiance. I think she hears a lot of my calls, and the number one thing that we're talking about in terms of whether or not talent progresses forward in our interview pipeline to being hired at Google is their role-related knowledge. It has to be super buttoned up. I think it's the secret that companies are not telling people, particularly for marginalized groups, in terms of where they should spend their time preparing for interviews. So I do think soft skills are really important. You got to know how to communicate. You got to know how to network, and I'll touch on that quickly in a second. But I want to make sure I emphasize here today that the work that you're putting here at Holberton in terms of learning the basic core technical skill sets is going to be the biggest point of payoff when you look at the pie that is what you offer. We need at least 50 to 60, maybe 70% of that to be role-related knowledge, basic coding, you know, the core fundamental structures of data, mathematics, algorithms, things like that. And I would say that to a 15-year engineer. I tell them, spend a couple of days studying those things again. Just refresh your mind, because if you're even talking about a high-level system infrastructure or system architecture, rather, that you're going to need to be able to relate it back down to the engineers. And we want to know, in fact, while you're interviewing, that you can communicate between the two. We want to know that of our entry-level engineers as well. Can you then kind of connect it to the bigger solution that you'd be solving for, that your code's going in? And if you could do that, you could probably get hired there. The last thing I mentioned is about recruiting specifically, and it's just because I've spent a couple of days responding back to LinkedIn messages at the start of the year to so many wonderful people reaching out. And if you're watching this, I'm sorry if I'm referencing you reaching out to me, but I think one of the biggest pains of a company like Google, this sort of mystified type of place where people want to get jobs, they go on LinkedIn and they reach out to recruiters. And they'll just reach out to any recruiter that they can find. And maybe the point of connection is that, oh, they look like me, or they're in a city that I'd like to work in for Google. I've probably responded back to 20 or 30 messages within the last day or two on LinkedIn, and each one of them I've had to mention routing them to a different recruiter. And it wasn't just like, oh, let me route you to like someone who does like non-tech roles if you're interested in non-tech roles, or other types of tech roles if you're interested in things I don't focus on. It was like, let me route you to an entry-level recruiter. I'm very clearly on my LinkedIn says that like I recruit executives at Google, and so you've kind of wasted that point of contact that you really could have made. And so I would encourage everyone, when you go on LinkedIn and when you're reaching out to those recruiters or when you're reaching out to those engineers, reach out to the people that you can find on there that do exactly what you're looking to do. Those are the people that you need to actually get back to you. Those are the people that are going to help you get the jobs. They're going to get the visibility on your resume. Reaching out to some random recruiter, reaching out to a random engineer, and hoping that what you reach out casts a net that sticks. I think it's an old-fashioned sort of way of looking at networking that just doesn't yield results.
Listen, it's a core skill set throughout your career, and we don't teach it to people. It's marketing.
Yeah.
It's basic marketing, right? You got a product, that you want to sell, and you just are going to dissipate the energy by offering it to everybody and not understanding who your market is.
That's it. You got to understand your market.
Yeah.
Wow, that's exactly it. In summation.
The product is you.
Yeah,
you got to understand the value of the product, and then who is it valuable to.
Exactly.
And then target that audience. But you're right, people blanket like, I got 1,000 resumes out today.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many resumes did you get out to the right
people?
I don't know. I got 1,000. 1,000 should yield 100 interviews. 100 interviews should yield 5 offers.
Yeah.
in what universe?
Yeah, exactly.
If it's a commodity, it's McDonald's, right? McDonald's can afford to offer a 99-cent hamburger to everybody because they're playing a volume game.
Yep, exactly.
But if you're playing a high-value game, like working at Google,
working at a place like that,
tech in general, it's about targeting. So that's awesome advice.
Sure.
I want to go back to the first thing you said, though. I really appreciate the kind of candor with which you said something that we don't say enough, which is hard skills.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a soft skill guy.
Same.
But I'm clear that you're getting hired for the job.
Yeah.
Hard skill, you got to get those hard
yeah.
skills solid.
Oh, yeah.
And we dance around it for whatever reason. And so I appreciate you calling that out.
Yep.
Is interviewing great is fine.
Yeah.
And critical, but
Yeah.
you gotta know your thing.
You
man.
gotta have it. You gotta have it. Yeah.
Interesting. Great.
It gives me anxiety. Who doesn't? I mean, again, especially coming from, I grew up in Baltimore. I have been in the process for the last year, a couple years myself, like applying to graduate school and taking graduate admissions tests and not really having any quant background, but also like not having these very like en route things since from where I come from and who I am, like to the space that I'm trying to be in today has been an incredible challenge. And sometimes I've sat up at night and I've been like, or I've complained to Iman that I wish that they would just let these requirements go, that it wasn't such a need for this hard skill set. And I'll tell you, we can complain about that all day. I get it. I complain about it myself. But as a recruiter at Google, and I see this all the time, where it's like, yeah, but I want to do an engineering role, but I have no coding skills. Or I want to do a product role, but I've never actually worked on a product and taking it to market. You don't have the role-related knowledge, you don't have the hard skill set, which is the majority of the requirements that we actually need. You look at the list of a job description, you look at the 10 or the 5 minimum qualifications and the 5 preferred qualifications, and you will notice collectively across most of them that 8 out of the 10 are actually focused on hard skill set requirement, and that maybe only a couple are looking at softer things. Right. That's probably going to tell you where you should spend most of your time preparing.
Yeah. It's fascinating. So you're transplant to Connecticut, right? There's a Connecticut thing where, last year it didn't happen. This year so far it hasn't happened. But the reality is, Connecticut, every year it snows, and it snows a fair bit.
Oh yeah.
And yet every year around the January, February time frame, it's like, oh my God, Connecticut snow. I gotta get. It snows here.
It snows here. It's here.
Get snow tires.
This is the bar. Yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
Right. That's what it is. Yeah.
And the same thing in the tech world. It's like, that's what it is.
Yeah. That's just what it is. Yeah.
Just do the work or move.
Yep.
Go into accounting or go into whatever.
Right, exactly. There's another type of job for you there. There's another type of job for you at Google if you didn't want to get those skills. But if you want that job, gotta have those skills.
That's it. Yeah. So we make it past. We got the hard skills. Kill the interview.
Yep.
Get hired.
Yes.
I am first generation.
Yes.
Kind of into a career.
Yeah.
Let alone a career at a place like Google.
Yeah.
I got no one to guide me outside of here.
Yep.
And I'm in this place that's like Disneyland, for tech.
Yep.
They just handed me $1,000 check to spend on life. They handed me a laptop. They handed me other.
Yeah. You remind me of my former self.
Perfect, right? So how do you navigate that? Because I just find it is existential crisis.
Yeah.
Like, who do I be here?
Yeah.
I don't know who to be here.
Yeah.
Is a certain kind of experience of it, right?
Oh man.
So tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, I think that the informality of a place like Google is so informal of a company that it almost shocks people to feel like they don't belong there because of how informal it is. I've actually had a teammate who worked at a really kind of buttoned-up consulting firm for most of their career come to Google and try to be a recruiter there for a couple of months, and they left and they went back to that old job, and the reasoning was just that it just seemed like such a zoo of a company at Google because of how casual everything is, and it is intimidating, and it is shocking and off-putting sometimes, and not in like ethically bad ways, but in ways that are just so unfamiliar to us in society. I think likewise for the first generation person, I'm that person, like I said, that has experienced that. One of the things that I'm now learning that I wish I did, again, being that identity, but when I was at that time, is kind of like spend the first 90 days to 6 months, maybe even a year, like not just observing the things happening around you, and we're actually kind of, again, learning this in our household recently, just in terms of accessibility to spaces that are unfamiliar with us, but to spend time like really listening to your inner voice in those moments, and like spend time listening and like observing yourself in that. Sometimes that could be sort of like the best guide, I think, for just like figuring out where we fit in these massive like spaces that feel incredibly unfamiliar. That could also help us to kind of find our authentic selves, I think. Listening to that inner voice and observing that inner person as we're going through these first initial stages of a new job in an unfamiliar space. That doesn't mean you have to be like hiding behind in your hoodie and like isolated. It definitely means interacting, and in fact, I think only by point of exposure are you able to kind of get that feedback loop. And so I think it's important to spend, you know, if you are that person that feels like you don't belong, to spend some time doing that, and it gives you a sense of grounding yourself in that environment, and again, a sense of finding your authenticity, and a sense of also just observing how you feel about things, because that will be incredibly informative to your second, third, fourth year, and so on. The other thing, I guess, in kind of the backside of that is just like, don't expect to have it all figured out immediately. One of the things that they pressed for me at Google when I started, and I remember thinking, I know how to do executive recruiting, I'm ready to get to it. One of the things that I really didn't understand and just needed time, not time and experience and exposure, but just like time itself to understand, was all of the world of Google. And so I had to spend some time actually drinking from the Kool-Aid, showing up with this laptop and this phone every day and just showing up. And it sounds ridiculous to say that, and you feel like, particularly as a black man at first gen, like that is underperforming, but it's one of the most fundamental things that you can do in a new environment, is just give yourself that time and space just to be yourself in it first. And the rest will come. If they spent the time hiring you, you've at least got a year. You know, like you've at least got a year to figure it out. So you might as well spend that year.
That's a great reframe. I love that.
The rest will come.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's very true. It makes a lot of sense intuitively, right? That you know, given how tough that place is to get into, if they let you in, they're going to give you some space.
Exactly. You know, I got to spend time like going to events. I went to Google Talks. I went to like Google Network events and stuff. I went to other events that my function, people operations would hold to develop us as employees and things like that. All things, again, not having to do, and luckily provided by Google, but not really having to do with my core job. And in a way, spending the first 3 or 6 months doing that taught me a lot more than I probably learned in the next 3 years that I've been at Google, actually doing my job on the day-to-day about Google itself, and it helps me. It helps me perform.
So this came up. Are you familiar with Clubhouse, the app that's?
Yes, I've been hearing about it.
You're not on it?
No, I got one invite and I didn't follow through. I don't know if the invite's still on the table.
I got some invites left. I was going to offer you one,
awesome.
but take the other invite if you don't. But if you need one, let me know.
Cool. Awesome.
I am pleasantly surprised by that platform in general, but in particular, the amount of thoughtful tech folks that are on there, and the amount of representation. So I spent 6 hours on a panel or on a stage, they call it there, about 300 people on Saturday, and the topic was Black men in STEM. And I'm there primarily to listen because I'm just trying to understand how do we help, and chime in with a couple of perspectives on things we're learning. But one of the questions that came up, and my kind of last question for you, and it relates to the previous question I asked, is one of the discussions that came up is that what you don't know going in is one thing. What you don't know in terms of what to ask and what to, right? So if you go back to yourself, right, what is like the biggest thing, if you had to say for somebody in your position back when you started out, what is the one thing you didn't know, like it wasn't even on your radar, that you can go back and just say, hey, get curious about this or ask about this, or what would that be?
I think that anyone could be a student of something that they're curious about. For me, as a recruiter, that's been understanding technology. So I spend probably, I think, more time on just understanding technology and kind of how it fits together in the spaces that I recruit, more than even understanding the talent in the space. And I'm happy to see when the moments connect and when the two things connect. But again, that was kind of like what I had coming in, was this understanding of like what executives look like, who they are, what types of things are they doing. But I knew nothing about all the weird technology that I now have to recruit for. And so I think it's important, if you want to understand the adjacent worlds around like your core functionality in any given role, is to take time to like learn about them. And then certainly I think one of the things I wish I knew 5 years into executive recruiting now, I think there was at one point, and again, not to kind of cast shame at my old job, but it's something I haven't really experienced between the two, luckily. I was once told that the way to kind of expand and really boom my career was I needed to have this super executive polish. I was too casual, I was too friendly, too much of this, person that was just being too much of myself. And I think we all hear that. And I think one of the things that Google's helped me realize was that it was just kind of changing the playing field. So I'm still working with very well-polished execs. Again, these are people who are running massive scales of somebody else's business. But they're human. And so, and they're kind of, I'm in this interaction with them because they see by benefit of our corporate structure that I provide a service for them of a skill set or knowledge that they don't have. For me, that's talent. And those folks, they're the engineers, they're the product leaders, but they don't necessarily get talent. And so that's where kind of rubber meets the road in terms of what I can provide. And that's enough space for me to absolutely be exactly who I am. And I think in our own special ways, not everyone's a recruiter, or not everyone's a recruiter interacting with executives. But I think we can find that sort of unique space to actually, again, just be yourself a little bit. The rest will kind of, by virtue of your intentions and your actions, kind of bolt onto you. Yeah. I've never had to become this reimagined. When I think of executive gravitas, I think of this like slick back hair, Wall Street banker, and I'm like, I'm not that person, but I'm absolutely in executive spaces today.
When I started out, I'm an old guy. I started out, I stumbled onto corporate. Like I had I studied music and Chinese philosophy.
Oh, cool.
And then it's a long story how I got it, but I got this opportunity. Kind of turned out I was good at the business thing, right? I had hair down to here. I used to wear it in a ponytail.
Wow.
I got promoted within 18 months. I got promoted to corporate. This is the North American division of Hachette, the publishing firm.
Oh yeah.
I got promoted to North American headquarters because I just and like when I tell you this, so this is like '94. Okay. I am convinced to this day that every man in that corporate office, and of course they're all men in the offices, like they had this thing. I'm convinced that third Tuesday of September every year, they all go together to the same tailor and buy the same gray suit, 10 of them, the same shirt, conservative, just kind of all this whole thing, right? I had this hair down to here, and I was like, I'm gonna do me.
Yep.
I wasn't even planning on being here. I'm having fun, but I'm gonna do me, and and what I learned really early, fortunately, was that the commodity in organization is most critical is results.
Yeah.
You produce results, and they will let you get away with anything. I don't mean ethically get away with anything or legally, but you can be who you are.
That's it.
Kill the results.
That's it.
That's
it.
Yeah.
I compare it to, I'm a big football fan, NFL football fan, and so I always make analogies to football, and I always think my job is stepping on the field as the quarterback in the third quarter with rocking fans around and 2 scores down. All I need to do is get the ball to the end zone. It doesn't matter the ways in which I get there. Everyone wants just really badly a touchdown right now. Exactly.
Don't break the rules. Exactly. Don't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
But put points on the board.
Got to make a play.
Everything else is
Exactly.
whatever. It's nobody remembers what you did there.
No.
They remember the score.
Yeah, that's
and assuming, again, you got there ethically and legally.
That's it.
We could do this for 4 hours. Actually, I do have one last question for both of you.
Yeah.
Did you wind up making it to Mia's before they closed? You didn't make it.
I don't think so. Yeah. They closed. Oh, yeah, before.
Yeah, 40 years. That place. That's right. We're going to... so I didn't think Unstuck, every Unstuck I would plug Mia's.
Yeah.
I got no interest in them, financially or otherwise. I just love that family. I love that restaurant. They're icons in Connecticut, in New Haven, and they are as good a community development organization as I've ever come across. Right? But Bun does events on his farm over the summer, so Next summer,
Please.
we'll get you guys out. And,
Lovely.
they're special people, and the food is just like.
Yeah, we missed the New Year's closing.
We'll
have to go
So see
there
that
for the
even you
open
guys are
house.
closed, I'm still plugging you. That's
Yeah.
all right. That's all right. We're gonna have people like standing outside the building and just
Yep.
some version of a sit-in until you open up again
Just
for a couple
waiting.
of days. Listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to be down
Thanks
here. I
so
know
much,
how busy
Al,
you
for
are.
the
I know how much you got going on. This is amazingly generous of you. Yeah.
Well, thank you all. I mean, you all have in a lot of ways just provided life to my life in New Haven, so I really
That's
appreciate
sweet.
it.
That's sweet. Yeah, and love the fact you're local. Definitely,
Yeah.
would love to have you kind of come
We'll
in
be back.
just informally. We
Yeah.
do a lot of like the concerts over the summer. We have 32 concerts we're going to do out on that stage.
Awesome.
A lot of good local acts. A pretty broad diversity. We're going to try to bring some international acts
great.
in, and so definitely come hang out with us. We'd love to have you as part of the
We'll
family.
We'll be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, you folks at home and who watch this afterwards, thanks for being here. Kevin Gillepsie.
Nice to meet you all.
Yeah. So, show him some love on LinkedIn, but don't
Yes.
go asking.
I can't
for
get you your job
jobs.
unless you do
That's
exactly
not
what you're
love.
looking
That's
for.
right. That's not love. Yeah. Thank you for being with us. And my usual plug. New Haven is what it is because of small business. We are continuing to listen, I'm in a privileged position. They are continuing to teeter, the restaurants, the bars, the small retailers, whatever you can do, shop local, shop local, shop local. Everybody's doing takeout. Some people are doing really good socially distanced in-house, right? Whatever you can do, the spiel, but I just feel obligated to say it anyway. And, just the times we're in nationally, I feel obligated to say this as well. Stay fierce, stay compassionate, but stay fierce. Not a time to go to sleep right now. Thanks for being with us.